Hi everyone and welcome to Fresh from My Garden. This is a view of our front porch where we have different varieties of outdoor and some indoor plants. So there are a lot of plants that we have here that are plants that we can keep indoors, but we do rotate them and bring them outdoors occasionally. So, this is a partial view of our living room where we have a pothos, a calathea, and palm plants in this part of the living room. And we also have several other plants in small containers on our windowsill. So, in today's video, I'm sharing some of our experiences with indoor plants and how we can prevent them from losing its beauty and dying back. So, when we purchase indoor plants, are they permanently meant to be indoors all the time? Take a look at this video and see what we have experienced. So, today I'll share different indoor plants that we had indoors and the condition of these plants, how it changed, and how it was after being indoors for a very long time. So, starting with our pothos plant, which I have shared in several videos previously. So, this was a plant that was indoors for a very long time and it did do well in indoors for a long time. And our living room has two big south facing windows, so that brings in a lot of bright light. Our living room has south facing windows, but in spite of that, the plants that you see here, this areca palm in this yellow ceramic pot, and the snake plant that you see here in this big pot, they were all placed indoors in bright, well lit areas. In spite of that, they didn't do well. So now you can see there is a small new growth in the container that has the snake plant, but we had to bring all of these outdoors. Now, this is a heart leaf philodendron which I had shared in the Diwali video too, and this has also been indoors for a very long time and it didn't die back or it didn't have any brown tips. But as you can see here, the new leaves of this plant are very small compared to the leaves that have been on the plant when we brought it home. So the new leaves are small because it's not probably getting enough light or enough fresh air, and the atmosphere is not suited well and it's not growing well. This is a lemon lime philodendron which we purchased as is from the nursery, and it has been outdoors and it has been doing very well. And this is a spot in our garden that receives bright indirect light. And these plants that you see here, most of them, the dracaenas and most of the philodendrons, they were all placed indoors and for extended periods of time, and they start having brown tips and brown leaves. And we have also lost a lot of plants due to this. Plants like the phytonias and peperomias, they are really sensitive to light. They are really sensitive to a lot of conditions and they don't really do well indoors for a very long time. There are plants like calatheas and syngoniums and also pothos plants that love bright indirect light, and they usually do well indoors for a few months. But once we start seeing signs of any brown tips or the plant losing leaves mainly and not showing any sign of new growth, that is the time when we really need to bring these plants outdoors because they are clearly not happy in the indoor atmosphere. Here we have this watermelon peperomia with these beautiful purple leaves. So we had two plants, one with dark green leaves and the other one with purple leaves. but we lost the other one in spite of it being at a south facing window and receiving a lot of bright light. Our kitchen, dining room, and living room all have south facing windows, and we have tried keeping a lot of these plants indoors. So, this is one small container which we keep on the windowsill, and I had planted a cutting of monstera in it, and clearly it didn't do well. And I have brought it out hoping that it would revive itself, and if it does not, we will have to replace it with another plant. Overwatering is another reason to kill indoor plants, and since these plants remain indoors with less air circulation, the soil tends to remain moist or wet for a longer period of time. Now, here we have some succulent plants in hanging baskets outdoors. We did try growing a lot of succulents indoors, but over a period of time, they started shriveling up and losing their leaves and also dying back completely. So, there are a very few succulents that really do well indoors. Haywartias are one such succulent that does well indoors. So there are lot of succulents here that we have, and we have kept them on the north facing window, and they are not doing so badly here because they receive quite a bit of indirect light. This is another small container where I had few indoor plants, but they all died back, so I had to bring it out and I placed a few cuttings of tangled heart in it. Another bamboo plant that was indoors and died back, no new growth, and now you can see the condition of this plant, and they are all outside. This is a Schefflera which has been outside for a long time and it's doing well. But this Syngonium is another plant that I've shared in a couple of other videos, and it was so beautiful. It had leaves until the top of this moss stick, and you can see how it looks now. In spite of being placed very close to a south facing window, it has not been doing well. But after bringing it outdoors, it's showing signs of new growth, and I'm really happy that this plant has not died back completely. So, there are a lot of plants that we had indoors, and we lost some plants altogether completely, and they just didn't come back to life, and we couldn't revive it. There was another ficus and jade plant that we had indoors, which started shedding leaves after being indoors for a long time. And then we have them up on our balcony, but these are new plants that we got for our garden. So, in addition to overwatering and also lack of bright light conditions, there can also be other reasons that are killing these indoor plants, and those could also be tiny pests that we are not noticing when they are being kept in spots or in corners of the room. So, when these plants are placed in corners or clustered up together, then there might be pest attacks that might be spreading through the plant, and we might not notice this until it's too late. So, keep an eye out for any kind of pest attack or any signs that show that these plants are not happy. So, this was a lemon lime philodendron that we had indoors, and it was really doing well, and it was looking really pretty for a very long time and looking like the other lemon lime philodendron that I am sharing here. So, it was looking as pretty as this, and after a few months of it being indoors, it started shedding its leaves and stopped showing any signs of new growth until it became like this. But now, after being outdoors for a while, it is starting to show signs of new growth. So, you can see some new leaves developing on this plant. Now, this is an update of the monster cutting that we took from my parents' garden. This plant, in spite of being outdoors, doesn't seem to be happy. The leaves are really limp and they don't look happy, or I'm just hoping that it'll do well since the plant has not dried up completely. So, hopefully, it will grow and do well. So, when we purchased indoor plants for the first time and when we checked with the people at the plant nursery, they told us that these plants would do well indefinitely indoors. And that's what we did. So, we placed these plants indoors indefinitely and they stayed beautiful for a few weeks or even a couple of months. But then, over a period of time, they started showing signs of not being happy, like browning of leaves, losing leaves, and not doing so well. Just like this aglaonema we have here. It was indoors for a very long time and it's just with 4 or 5 leaves. It was doing better than this before we took it indoors. But now, after being outdoors, hoping that it will start doing well. But in our beginning stages of gardening, we didn't know too much about indoor plants well enough to understand these signs that these plants were not happy and to bring them outdoors and let them revive themselves. So we lost a lot of plants like that. For example, we had coleus and Dracena, we had Schefflera, we had so many plants indoors that looked really beautiful for the first few weeks, and we were really excited to get new beautiful plants for our indoor living space. But over a period of time, they just died back. They, didn't even revive themselves even after we brought them outdoors. So now we are learning more about indoor plants, and from what we understand, indoor plants are not meant to be indoors permanently. They need to definitely get the fresh air and lot of light, and also they need humidity. There are a lot of plants like calatheas that require humidity to do well. So even if we have place them in a spot where they receive a lot of bright indirect light, it might always be the best thing to bring them outdoors on a rotational basis. If we are placing these plants indoors for a few weeks or even a month, after that period of time, it's a good thing to bring them out and keep them out in the open where they get more light from all directions, a lot of humidity, and they are exposed to the actual nature in order for them to grow well. So, in this tour of our front porch, you're seeing a lot of indoor plants that we have here. And since now we are having rains, we have brought them all outdoors so that they can get a lot of fresh air and also get some rain. Rain is the best form of water, and these plants will really do well because the rainwater contains nitrogen and it helps these plants do really well. Now, here is one spider plant that I had shared in another video, and these spider plants were indoors for a very, very long time. And this is the condition of the plant. I'm sure this plant should have done much better and should have had a lot of growth because this is more than 2 years old. But this is the growth after it has been indoors for an extremely long time. Now, comparatively, this is another spider plant that has been outdoors for quite some time, and both these plants are about the same age, and this plant is doing well and it has got a lot of pups. This is the plant from which I got a few pups to propagate, and this plant is really doing well. So right now it is at the west end of our garden, but since we don't have too much of harsh sunlight now, it's colder and it's raining. So, this is a good time for them to be outdoors and get all that fresh air and rain so that they can grow well. So, once it is summertime, this might not be the best spot for these plants to grow, and then I can keep them indoors for a couple of months. So, in the previous video, also, I had mentioned when I was propagating these spider plants that this plant has started doing well after we brought it outdoors, and it has started sending out all these pups after it has been placed outdoors. This is another planter that I had showed when we propagated some cuttings of philodendron and pothos earlier. So these two ceramic planters were purchased for us to keep indoors with some indoor plants like pothos and philodendron. But keeping them indoors didn't help much because these cuttings haven't grown much since I have planted them. So we are going to keep them outdoors until this rainy season is over, and once the harsh summer begins and if the plants are really doing well, so then we will take them away from the harsh sunlight and keep them indoors for some time. This is a philodendron burl marks that we got from our parents' garden, and it was really filled with lot of leaves and lush green growth, and it has been in our dining room next to the window for quite some time. And the spot also fell down a few times. It lost its soil, the pot got damaged, it got broken, but in spite of that, this plant is doing okay, but there is not much new growth, or you can see that the plant is not at its best look. So, a couple of days back, we shifted this outdoors to see how much it can revive itself. And once it grows, we'll take it indoors for some time. So these are some of the indoor plants which, though are actually indoor plants, we have kept them outdoors because they are not doing so well and not growing much indoors. This is an glonema, and we had this indoors and there was no new growth, but it has been outdoors for the last couple of months. And here you can see that there are two new saplings in the same container. It just had one plant initially, and there was no new growth, there was nothing happening, and it was just sitting as is. But after bringing it outdoors, there are two new saplings, and we are pretty happy to see this change in this plant. And also with this pink syngonium was indoors, the leaves were all starting to curl up and it was losing all its beauty before we brought it outdoors a couple of months back. Now we can see that there are new leaf buds growing and it is looking much better than how it looked when it was sitting indoors. This is a fairy garden. You might have seen the video of us making this fairy garden, and we added these mini aglonemas to this fairy garden. But this little plant just had the stump, it didn't even have a new leaf. It lost whatever leaves it had and it came down to its stump before we brought it outdoors, and you can see the change on this plant. So, if you love indoor plants just like we do, just make sure that your plants are happy. And if it shows any signs of browning tips or losing leaves, then the plant is very clearly not happy in its current surroundings. I know that there are a lot of people who might not agree with what I said, and they are growing indoor plants really successfully and have them permanently growing indoors. But with our experiences on indoor plants, we know that indoor plants do well indoors for quite a long time, but after a extended period of time indoors, no matter how much of care and light and fertilizing and all the things that we do for these plants, they clearly are not completely happy indoors, and they definitely do need to get outdoors to get all that fresh light. And definitely they would get light from all directions only when they are brought outdoors. Whenever they are indoors, there is always light only from one or two sides of the plant. There are a couple of sides which is either covered by a wall or furniture, and this prevents the plant from getting enough light for it to develop new leaves and new growth. Now I'll show you another plant that was indoors, and this is a areca palm which was almost 6 foot tall, and you can see this in another video that I had shared earlier. So this was kept next to the Buddha, and it was looking really beautiful and green and lush. And after being kept indoors for a long time, this is the condition. So we just brought it out a couple of days back. It has been right next to our north facing window. But as the jackfruit tree outside the window grew, it started blocking out a lot of light, and this plant was not getting enough light to grow. So I hope I have been able to share some information and tips on indoor plants. I know that there are a lot of people who grow indoor plants successfully without any problems, but this is something that we have been facing, and I definitely wanted to share these tips with anybody who is new to growing indoor plants in the garden, because it's really heartbreaking to get all these plants for our indoor living spaces and to see them die back and look really ugly, and then we just have to get rid of them or discard them, because indoor plants are really expensive. Most plants are expensive and most plants are really beautiful too. So we don't want to lose any of these plants by not caring for them properly. So the takeaway from this video would be not to keep your indoor plants indoors permanently. Bring them outdoors every couple of weeks and let them be in a spot where they receive a lot of bright, indirect light and not any harsh sunlight. And let them be in that spot for a few weeks or maybe a month before you bring them back indoors again. And when we keep them indoors, they don't get exposed to fresh air or rainwater, which is really essential for these plants to grow well and look beautiful. So I hope you enjoyed today's video and got to learn a couple of tips on indoor plants, and it was also nice to share our experiences on growing these beautiful plants in our garden. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more gardening related videos, and also do share in the comment section below about your experiences with indoor plants. If you do have any questions or problems related to indoor plants, please do share them in the comment section below, and I will definitely try to reply to all of them and answer as many questions as possible. I do post regular updates on the YouTube community page and also on my Instagram page and Facebook page. So don't forget to follow for gardening updates. And thanks for watching Fresh from My Garden.